Welcome back to As the Rabbit Descends Down the Hole. In this episode, we are going to, again, we're talking about Moses. We're going to hit another big topic here because this really needs to be addressed. We're going to talk about, so Moses led these people out. They were slaves, and now he's building this community with them. And, like I said, you don't want to oppress a foreigner and things of that nature. And we've already addressed that. That's what's in the last episode. What this one is going to address, though, is remember they were slaves, so don't enslave other people. Okay? Now, granted, slavery was a worldwide phenomenon. Every race, everywhere, was slave at some point in time. Okay? Just get over it, okay? It wasn't just a transatlantic slave trade and that was it, No. So the law condemns this. But we need to understand that it was not just the transatlantic slave trade. How many people know about the Barbary pirates? I mean, how many people actually know about the white slavery with that? How many people actually know that Slavic means slave? Slavic is Europeans, northern Europeans, at that. How many people know about the Ottoman Empire, which ruled for a very long time, hundreds of years? I mean, it's fascinating how long that's been lasting, right? And, what did they do? I mean, here's an interesting side note concerning the Ottoman Empire. They killed more people than all U.S. wars combined times 10. The Ottoman Empire did. It was phenomenal bloodshed. I mean, that's why, the Crusaders, people talk about the Crusaders and things like this. Oh, they're horrible people. They started out, there was 3 Crusades. They started out very noble. The first 2, they looked to take on the Muslims, take back Jerusalem. And they pretty much stayed their course. The third one, they kind of got off track. And they did some things that were very questionable. And I don't think people have a problem denying that they did some questionable. But people need to understand what they were, what they were doing. And the first 2 really, the first one, they were impeccable. The second one, there was a couple of things, some incidences, but by and large, they were still, the third one, they started doing some, they got off track, okay? The point I'm getting at here is, and let me give you one more thing with this concerning this issue of slavery, because this is a major thing that needs to be addressed, and it is addressed in Deuteronomy. There's a couple of different spots, and Leviticus and Numbers they address this as well. And see, the Barbary pirates is a faction of history that for some reason is not in our history books. Do you know that was our first war? It wasn't the Revolutionary War with Britain. I thought it was Revolutionary War, literally not just through college, but even or not just in high school, but even in college. It wasn't until much later that I even learned about the Barbary pirates and even learned about the white slave trade with that. That was fascinating. That was actually our first war that we went to town on. There's a book called White Gold. It's very interesting. I highly recommend you check that out. It tells the story about Thomas Pello. Anyway, but I highly recommend that you read that. See, all of them had things, and when they say, "Oh well," it was just the white people with the Africans. Well, wait a minute. The Africans were enslaving other Africans way before the white guy ever got there. This was a power struggle that was going on. The Dahomey, their entire kingdom, the Dahomey kingdom was based on slavery. They enslaved other, Africans were enslaving other Africans. See, white people, Europeans, they never went into the interiors of Africa until much later. I mean, much later. I mean, even today, I mean, people don't really go into the interior of Africa. You know, the northern part of Africa was more Islamic, ruled, and they enslaved from that side. And that's something that's overlooked is their slavery on that side lasted much longer. In fact, it's actually still going on. It's called the you look this up, it's called the sub-Saharan slave route. They go through Libya. This is going on today, right now. The average slave costs $200. That's what they're charging. Look this up. It's going to bother your mind. You know. Well, who's orchestrating that? It's Islam. I mean, the Islamists are. That is part of their. They say, well, that's just their culture, and they kind of give them a pass with that. Wait a minute. What if that was a part of Christian culture and things like that? Would they get a pass for that? Of course they wouldn't. Of course they wouldn't. You know, but for some reason we're giving a pass to them. I don't understand why. You know, Judeo-Christianity has been a driving force to stop this. You know, and as far as armed forces and things like that, I mean, Britain, they put their foot down. You know, the Americans put their foot down and they stopped it. The Judeo-Christian countries stopped it. They stopped it. Okay? You really need to understand that. They participated in it and they stopped it. It actually stopped in 1807. It was way before the Civil War. It's called the Act of 1807. All importing stopped at that point. So this is shortly after the country was founded. The country was founded, you know, as far as 1776, our independence year and things like that. It was 1807, you know, that this act came about. That they were going to put a stop to this. And see, they created all these logistics in the South. And you think, well, it was just a bunch of white people in some southern states. You should go down south if you haven't been, or go to the slave marts. You know, approximately, it kind of depends on the area you were in, but approximately a third of all slave owners were black people. I know, it blew your mind. About a third. You know, some regions it was less, some regions it was more. In fact, one of the biggest ones in South Carolina was a black man. And they say he was pretty, from the writings about him, he was one of the bad ones as far as he was pretty vicious towards people. So, I really think people need to understand these things. These things were written in the Bible. These things were stopped. These things were written about so many years ago. About how to address these issues, and for it just takes people so long, man, to catch up. And however, they did caught up. But what I'm getting at is this, okay? When it comes to the law, it's not outdated. Okay, it's not outdated. There are things within it that we may seem as strange. You know, the separation of like meat and dairy, and we'll get into some of that stuff. But it's also, there was no refrigeration either. Think about it. So, I mean, it was you don't have a refrigerator, you need to do that so it doesn't cross contamination and spoilage and all that sort of stuff. So, I mean, God is getting, these are very practical things, And you need to learn more about what's going on, And I know you're gonna say, well, what about the Indians? Yeah, we did some crap things to the Indians. The Indians did some crap things to us too. But there was a time, for a while, we got along until the colonies and the Indians. For quite some time, they actually got along pretty good. It wasn't until Martin Van Buren, when they started really pushing down and Andrew Jackson as far as to take command. It was like take command of them and drive them out. I mean, that's when that started happening, and because they wanted to expand west, they wanted to get past the Appalachians and things like that, and really move the territory. You know, so you have this conquest and all these battles that happen. You know, we want some, they want some. I mean, things of that nature. And yeah, there was some very reprehensible things that were done to the Indians, and I'm not saying that was good or anything. I'm not saying that at all. I think we could have worked with them a lot better. You know, truly, I think we could have worked with them a lot better. But at the same time, the Indians weren't smoking peace pipe either. I mean, they went after each other. It wasn't just us. I mean, they went after each other. You know, quite a bit. You know, there's some interesting history that that would be quite eye-opening. You know, the Cherokee. Wow. Or no, not the Comanche. Sorry, they were really violent, and it wasn't just like against the white man. I mean, it was against each other. There was a lot of, just because they didn't have big wars all the time, they had raiding camps. So they had these little wars that happened a lot more than people realize. These raiding camps. So the pre-civilization, as they call it, you know, period it wasn't, you know, sitting around eating corn and, you know, hanging out by the campfire. Right? It was a pretty wild time, the Wild West, you know. Perhaps I got off a little bit of a tangent with this episode, but, you know, there's a divine law, there's human greed, there's all these things that get played into all these things, and slavery is much more than we realize, and God addresses us with Moses very early on. So I hope you got something out of this, and I'll see you in the next one.